let's start off with you, Stanton. And, you know, we're looking at that insert that was just played out. It is all about a real-life experience, so technology has brought that to the fore. And when you look at Telepresence, it really came about in around 2006 and really transcending the lines that what we saw from video conferencing, which has been around for around 2 decades.
Correct. No, you're 100% correct. I think the technology coming through from video conferencing through to telepresence and immersive telepresence has transformed in leaps and bounds. And I think that's been generating all the interest in the market at this point in time.
And looking at the public room now that Neotel has just launched, the only one on the continent at this point in time, tell us what prompted this. And clearly this is just a move towards, again, technological advances and being innovative in your space.
Well, I guess the major advancement was bringing a network into the country that could drive telepresence. You know, for many years we've been limited in what we've had access to from a technology perspective. So from a Neotel strategy, and certainly Tata Communications, the key strategy we have is to have a global telepresence footprint or capability to connect to telepresence rooms. With Neotel's entry into the market, having one locally just made a lot of sense and gave the South African community the opportunity to get on board with the global market.
Well, South Africa is not the only one embarking on telepresence. Also moving over to East Africa, Shahab joins us now from our studios in Nairobi. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the program. Let's start off by kicking off to see where exactly we stand in East Africa, particularly in Kenya, when it comes to telepresence.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the studio. I wish, we would have done this over telepresence so we could have a real life experience, but we'll do it definitely next time. So I think East Africa is really making a huge progress, and we launched beginning of last week on Monday the first public telepresence rooms in East Africa, in Kampala, at Serena Hotels and in Nairobi, together with Safaricom and Tata Communication. So I think this is the first major step in terms of making the telepresence service available across the region. And we will see expansion throughout the region and probably even beyond the East Africa borders.
Well, let's take a step back and kicking off with you, Ted, looking at the technology and how it has helped business. Let's look at some of the benefits, because some say, well, it's definitely going to cut costs on the travel front and obviously your daily expenses as well. But some would say that when you look at the actual technology itself, it's obviously much better to have someone next to you. Tell us exactly the differences between telepresence, and I know that there's immersive technology that's come to the fore that changes and transcends those boundaries.
Yeah. So it's really a progressive experience that you have, and traditional telecommunications has always just been at an arm's length. The technologies that came out subsequent, video conferencing and what you can do over the web, still keep you at an arm's length. What we've found is, although that you do realize cost savings on travel and things like your carbon footprint and the way that you use technology, the real benefit comes down to business productivity and becoming efficient on the business side. So I can really relate it to, if you wanted to go and get something done quickly, normally people, and it's human nature that you'd run into the office next door and go and have a quick meeting. Rather than something that's scheduled and set up. Now, telepresence is starting to bring that to the fore. Video conferencing, you might as well make a telephone call and you can see somebody's there and somebody's listening in. But telepresence really gives you that buy-in of the individual, and the expectation is then set. So what we've found is, although there's a primary driver to save costs on travel, there's a productivity increment that people get from just having a personal experience and being able to have this kind of discussion or this kind of discussion. Yeah. And we'll see that starting to ramp up quite quickly as it has.
Well, Stanton, perhaps you could take us through the various categories, telepresence categories.
Sure. I think the telepresence expands in a number of profiles, and that's from room-based telepresence systems, which is the traditional video conferencing, which has now expanded to high-definition conferencing units, as well as the telepresence as we know it with the 3 panels displays. And expanding over and above that is immersive telepresence, which is lifelike experience. So standing straight, as an example, you'd be able to see the full-size image of the person on the other side, irrespective of the location.
Shahab, let's take this to you. And, looking, as we mentioned a little earlier, to the history of this technology, it was a bit slow in terms of take-up on the African continent, particularly in South Africa. Why do you think that that is the case? And also, how quickly do you think it could expand into East Africa now that we have seen some headway being made?
As I think, the Neotel colleague was alluding to, I think, the primary reason why Telepresence could not, introduce faster was actually the availability or the abundance availability of bandwidth. And I think with the arrival of the sea cable and the sea cable, the CCOMs and teams, etc., at the East African coast, that was the really reason why we could make it actually available. And I think, going forward, we will see this type of technology not only being deployed by the service provider as another revenue stream, but actually more and more by the corporates and even by the SMEs to increase the productivity and efficiency, but also reduce the costs of the travel and communication.
Well, Shahab, do you think it's going to be welcomed by the investor community? Clearly, Africa, a very untapped market in many senses, and also a very difficult place to travel towards. Do you think it's also going to open perhaps new flows of money? Foreigners that are sitting at other ends of the planet will be able to now to access various conversations where before it just was very difficult to do so.
Oh, absolutely, because I think what's going to happen is you will ultimately open doors to opportunities in terms of communication and collaboration and new business model in terms of tapping into the resources locally but also internationally from both ends, really, which wasn't actually possible without really traveling. And I think given the challenges which we have these days from a political, security and other aspect point of view, you will see that this will take up completely in a different way. And I think this is what we're actually trying really to achieve, to make sure that the telepresence becomes a absolutely ubiquitous service as the mobile phone, like any other kind of communication. And I think we will see a very different range of services being deployed across the community, across the different line of business, being the internet kind of communication, internet between the companies, but also of course with the application to various different areas, education, health, etc. So that will tremendously change the landscape.
It sounds like a video revolution to me. Stanton, Polycom alludes to three issues and that you're calling it tipping points in the industry. Could you take us through those? And obviously it's just got to do with the fact that life is just becoming far faster and we're starting to see a lot more technology assisting us to embark on telepresence in South Africa in particular.
Most definitely. The current scenario with the Polycom solutions is that it allows interoperability into other vendors' platforms. So irrespective of which manufacturer or vendor solution is in place, it will interoperate into those areas. The insert from the media was actually quite hilarious because TIP obviously is now, Polycom is interoperating into the Cisco world of proprietary protocols with the TIP protocol. And that's allowing Polycom to open the collaboration further to the proprietary vendors in that space.
Ted, also let's touch on pricing. I think that's one thing that has perhaps deterred business from embarking on this because it is very pricey, particularly when you focus at the differences between telepresence and video conferencing. Some of the numbers that I have researched, we're looking at a range of $200,000 US dollars to $400,000 US dollars, with around $300,000 list price perhaps representing the average for a 6-seat room. In contrast, video conferencing much cheaper, which could be as high as $65,000 US dollars. So massive difference coming through there.
There is a massive difference, but there's a massive difference in experience, and it's horses for courses. The revolution of video technologies in telecommunications and in communication in general, I think you need to apply the right technology for the right purpose. If you start to compare the kind of costs that you incur for regular business travel, particularly internationally, you take the cost of time that you're at the office. When you start putting 6 key executives into a room, those costs are no longer as large as they typically would seem. What we're certainly seeing though, and there's two aspects to it. The one is the cost of the physical room that you need to invest in, And the second one is the infrastructure or the bandwidth that you have to pay from a telecommunications provider. The key angle to this, though, is having access to a number of endpoints. You know, the more telephones that you can dial, the more valuable that device is to you. So this is the nature of, you know, telepresence and video conferencing. Being able to interoperate and connect into a global messaging exchange will see you having access to multiple locations across the globe. And that initial investment of 200, 300, 400, 500,000, depending on the type of device you buy, actually starts to generate its own return.
Well, you launched your public room in virtual public room in 2009, late 2009. What has the uptake been? Have you seen lots of interest?
Well, we have. There's really two streams of uptake. The one stream of uptake is beyond just the company CEO. It's for the general company. So as an organization, it doesn't matter who you are in the organization, you should have access to telepresence. And if you need to have an education session with your colleagues abroad, or you need to have a business meeting with a one-on-one with you know, maybe a subject matter expert, our organization uses that on a daily basis. So fundamentally getting time in the room is probably our greatest challenge because the demand's so high. The public have the option to use it as a public room, and they buy hours, same way that anybody else would.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to a short commercial break. More on telepresence when we come back. Stay tuned.